been a bit of a disaster, isn't it, this campaign, Liberal Democrats?
It's been a tough campaign, and I think for us...
Wow, you're not even going to try and deny it's been a disaster?
No, of course we're not, because the key thing for us was when Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party stood down in that very large number of seats. That was an enormous game changer for us. I think what is important is that we...
Why was it a game changer?
Simply because instead of having two parties vying for Leave votes and 4 parties vying for Remain votes, it became very polarised between the Conservatives.
You sure you shouldn't rely on Nigel Farage for popularity?
Well, he made
the fact you sat... with great respect, the fact you sat here and you haven't even tried to deny my charge that it's been a disaster.
Nigel Farage said when he announced it, this was intended to stop us. He's not stopping us, because the other key thing is that we are still in play in over 100 seats. We're in a good second place.
But you've already
on the poll last night.
You've all but given up, haven't you?
No, not at all. Because I think we've been talking about
But I said your campaign's
voting.
been a disaster and you didn't even try to deny it.
What I've said is
you mean
game
at least
changer.
put a fist up, at least say, I wouldn't use the word disaster.
You've just been talking...
the honesty.
You've been talking about honesty, and let's just say...
Is it time for Liberal Democrats to be very honest with themselves and about another matter, which is the catastrophic error of this campaign? It seemed to me, and I say this as somebody who voted Remain, was to make your position on Brexit to cancel it, to revoke Article 50 and pretend it never happened. Actually, what I hear from voters up and down the country of all persuasion is that is the most vicious assault on democracy imaginable, and it came from a party that has the audacity to put Democrat in their title.
We only said we would do it if we won a majority and therefore had a mandate. In other words, it had come from the people.
But it became your theme to stop Brexit.
Absolutely.
And
was it a mistake?
We are still intending to stop Brexit.
But was it a mistake?
We recognise we can't do it on our own.
Was it a mistake to say you're going to revoke Article 50?
I think let's get to the other side of the election and see, because if we end up with a hung parliament, then that's the point at which we can have a people's vote.
Sal Brinton, I'm surprised you're not saying to Remain voters, yes, we absolutely still want to stop Brexit.
And we are
And we believe that there is a huge number of people out there who feel like Brexit would be a disaster for the country. And so we are absolutely sticking to our message. But the fact that you're wobbling... you're wobbling on that message, I think...
I am not wobbling from that at all.
...means that people lose confidence.
Piers asked if we still thought that we could revoke by... we're not going to win a majority tomorrow.
But
we know that.
With all due respect, we're never going to win a majority.
You accept that the main premise of your Brexit position is unachievable?
We were always clear we'd only do that, and then we remain clear that if there's no mandate, then we still remain that we want a people's vote. And the key thing for us tomorrow is if people want to stop the Conservatives and stop Brexit, voting Liberal Democrat, particularly in Remain areas, is the way to do it.
But the ones who may have been tempted,
last night
the ones who may have been tempted feel very angry that you wanted to basically cancel democracy. How can you really call yourselves Liberal Democrats when you have no respect as Liberals for other people's vote, and you're anti-democracy?
No, it's not anti-democracy to say if you win a majority in an election that you will then do something, because I think most of us agree that we are held to account for our manifestos if we get into government.
As someone that voted Remain, again, it is anti-democracy to me to simply cancel a referendum result without even trying to enact it. That is an anti-democratic position.
Many people have said, not just to me, but to many other Remainer canvassers from all the Remain parties over this election, they hadn't realised what was going to happen under the proposed Johnson and before that May plan to Brexit. And that's why the polls have consistently shown for the last 2 years that if there were a referendum tomorrow, actually Remain would win, and by
Jo Swinson's personal popularity is now worse than Jeremy Corbyn's.
I think that is not surprising, with a very clear message of Remain. Leave voters who haven't seen her. She's only been leader for 3 months.
The more people see of her, the less they like her.
But I think that's also partly exposure. We know that in the seats...
Exposure? What do you mean? You mean the more we see her, we don't like her?
Yes, let me finish. Where we are strong in seats, we also know that Jo's ratings are also significantly higher. And I think at the moment, it's very early days for her.
You say it's early days. It's actually quite late days now.
It's better than Jeremy Corbyn, I have to say. And she's
Actually, she's more unpopular than Corbyn now.
Well, let's see what happens.
Well, she is. It's in the polls today. Sorry.
Do you think it was helpful when your former leader, Vince Cable, said that the party's policy to scrap Brexit without another referendum was, quote, a distraction and not a very helpful one?
I think hindsight is a wonderful thing, and Vince, the point at which Vince had said that, I think it was quite clear at that moment that it hasn't been particularly helpful to us, back to where we started this discussion.
Are you identifying as a woman today?
I certainly am, Piers.
You are. How many sexes do you think there are?
Right. There are a number of sexes, men and women, and there are those who are intersex. And you're moving on to the debate about trans.
Yes. I'm moving to the debate where Jo Swinson's position in her effort to be
She was asked
super
what a
woke,
woman is.
She went on to say that self-identity should be respected and that Liberal Democrats actually want to change the law so that anyone can basically go, I'm a woman, and that should be totally respected to the degree that anyone that does that is then able to use all facilities available to women.
Single
whether
sex
they
spaces.
be, single-sex loos or whatever it may be. Do you agree with that?
Interestingly, this is what the government was consulting on in the summer.
But do you agree with it?
Absolutely, I do. And no, they've postponed
Anyone
it. They just stopped.
anyone can
they
say,
didn't
I'm
reject
a woman,
it. They stopped.
and your position is they're a woman.
They're... If
Well, yes
they
or
weren't,
no?
it is. You can't just say yes or no.
You can,
Piers.
actually.
The issue
You
here-
can.
No, the issue.
Self-identity these days is out of control. It means that anyone now can literally go, I'm a woman, or I'm a man if they're born biologically to a female body. You can just go, I am something else. And everything, apparently, according to Liberal Democrats, you have to respect that so much that you then damage women's rights to accommodate people going, I'm a woman.
There is no way that accepting that trans women who have usually come on a very long and difficult journey before they've even got to the point of wanting to identify as a woman. Many of them have mental health crises, including suicide attempts, all of those things. As Liberal Democrats, we stand up for the rights of individuals.
1 in 50
and
male prisoners right now is self-identifying as female. Some of them are being transferred to women's prisons as a result. That, many would argue, is an attack on women's rights.
The prison service has very strict rules of risk assessment for these prisoners, and they are supposed to make sure that before a trans woman is moved to a woman's prison, that they've done a risk assessment for the safety of the women in
somebody who goes through...
And let me just finish. Yeah. If there is any risk at all, either they're not moved or they are kept in a
We've actually already
unit.
had male prisoners identifying as women, then attacking women when they get transferred
the prison
to female
service
prisons.
apologised because they had not done the risk assessment.
But see,
that doesn't make the whole thing
How many
wrong.
genders do you think there are?
There are at least 2 because of the issue.
But the BBC is now lecturing children that there are over 100. Do you agree with that?
I have no idea the detail of those 100.
It was a BBC educational video informing children there are now over 100
Piers,
genders.
without seeing it, I can't get
Well, it was
into
a big story. You must have been aware of it.
No, the 100. I mean,
Do you think there are 100 genders?
I think that there are people who certainly feel extremely concerned about their gender, and that's why, I
Do we
know
respect
some...
any... My point is, do we, as Jo Swinson seemed to suggest, do we simply accept anyone can identify as any gender they see fit? Given that one of the 100, by the way, is an affinity with the stars in the... Well, you're laughing, but this is serious.
As I said, I haven't
They
seen
are
it.
Astra something, right, which is a gender where you feel an affinity with the planets and the stars. And then do we change laws to accommodate people who have an affinity to the stars? These are serious questions.
I think the serious question is how we treat each other. And the problem with this debate has been that trans women in particular have been absolutely demonised and vilified by a small group of feminist
trans women who've gone through the process that you discussed earlier, right? The physical, psychological, emotional transition, they feel as incensed as anybody else by this self-identity explosion, because it is, when you laughed at the idea of affinity with the planets, but that's not a laughable thing. It's one of the 100 genders the BBC wants to tell children they can identify as. And then the Liberal Democrats, according to Jo Swinson, they want to change all sorts of laws to allow anyone who goes, I'm a woman, to then go into women's spaces. And a lot of women feel very uncomfortable about this.
So women's
Why
refugees...
aren't you standing up for women?
Well, we do stand up for women, and that's why Jo said very clearly in that interview, you have to do risk assessment.
But Jo Swinson was
Jo
Swinson was effectively putting the rights of self-identifying women who've maybe in some cases not transitioned in any sense at all, other than going, I'm a woman, above the rights of biologically born women.
We have to respect the rights of all people within, obviously, sensible reason. And the reason this has exploded is because trans women in particular have not had their rights respected.
OK.
That's not just...
You just sat here 5 minutes ago and said there are two genders. Have you told that to the transgender community?
No, I didn't say two genders. Actually, what I said was that at least two.
How many do you think there are?
I referred to intersex.
Well, that was
also
sex, not
non-binary.
gender. They're two different things.
I think if you read the expert articles, you will...
Sex and gender are two different things.
No. Intersex is also about gender.
Right.
If you look at babies who are born, one of the problems we've had in the past is that doctors have often...
So when you said there were two genders, what did you actually mean?
Early. Well, Piers, there's at least two. I think
How many are there?
The point is, if there are concerns about risk in single-space centres, you've got to do risk assessments.
But if Jo Swinson believes anyone can self-identify as anything, I just wonder, what you as a president of the party, how many genders are there that you respect on honour and think are legitimate?
It isn't a numbers game. I respect and honour...
BBC says it's over 100.
I am not the BBC. I am not the BBC.
Sal Brinton, President of the Liberal Democrats, would you like to make a prediction for tomorrow?
Pain, as they said in Rocky 3?
I think it will be better than predicted. The interesting thing about all the MRP polls that have been published this election is that they've said in certain seats, particularly where there's a strong Remain vote, it is too close to call. So we think it will be better than the predictions.
OK, and if it's a lot worse than predictions, Jo Swinson to lose her job?
I doubt it. She's very new at her job. She's actually been, for all the things that you were talking about earlier, about being honest, open, accessible to the public during this election.
The trouble is,
showing about
the more open and accessible she's been, the less popular she's got. It's a bit of a problem for a party leader.